Welcome to the show. We are inside the Mentors Chapel on the Mentors wedding venue, and I'm here with Lisa from SST Incorporated, and we are actually going to talk about something I don't want to say most brides and grooms forget about, but a very important aspect, and specifically the legal aspect surrounding weddings. Lisa, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. And I think first, just give me a little bit of a background of your company, what you guys do, etc.
Hi, Rieg. Thanks so much for having us on the show. We're really looking forward to this. Well, I'm an attorney from SST Incorporated. So we're a law firm in South Africa, and we're also part of the RRAD group, which is an international group that has accountants and attorneys that work together. So basically, we're involved in all aspects of law, from commercial to family law. So we're very widespread all over the place. But today we're here to speak about the AntiNatural Agreements and marital regimes, especially relating to couples that are about to get married. Like you said, it's usually neglected, and it's very important. It's the most important thing you're going to do in your life. So I think it's very important that we discuss it today, and I hope I can assist you guys. Very happy to be here.
Well, thank you very much. I think funny enough, earlier today when me and Eidie spoke, we actually spoke about our agreement that was drafted many years ago, and it's something that you forget about, and I think that's the thing. I mean, even for us, luckily we are happily married for 20 years, so there was no need to
really use it.
To use it, if I can call it that. But I do think for a lot of couples, it's something that they don't neglect. So from your side, I mean, maybe talk them through the process, because I think that's often where this whole issue starts. They don't know when they need to do what.
Yes. Okay, well, first of all, let's just say usually it's, your young couples, the ones that are getting married for the first time, but also typically people that are entering into a second marriage that have been divorced. So I want to address all of those aspects. But first of all, you need to go in, I think, sit by yourself and do some research. Not everyone has an LLB or a law degree. Yes. So obviously you're not going to understand how to go about it. First of all, you can do some research on the internet. I mean, the internet has lots of very informative websites such as LegalWise, or even Facebook has some if you look at a lot of firms, they put podcasts out and articles to advise you on where to just get started. I think it will be a good idea for you and your fiance to sit and discuss what your legal position would be in a marriage. That's not as fun as choosing out your cake or your flowers, but I mean, it's the most important part actually. So first of all, I would advise just doing some research. Then booking an appointment with an attorney or a notary public, which I'll discuss a little bit later. But just to get an idea from them, book a consultation with them. It's worth every cent if they do charge you, because I mean, at the end of the day, it can affect your entire future and life. So first of all, just to discuss and understand what type of marriages you can enter into, and then what the consequences and the financial and legal consequences is of each marriage set up and system. And then also, this is in the case of gay couples and heterosexual couples and customary marriages as well. So just very broadly, get an idea of more or less what you want to do and what you want to achieve, and discuss it, and then go sit in front of an attorney and discuss it with them.
Okay, so that's something that you kind of need to sort out for yourself beforehand. What type of wedding you are entering into. Am I right in understanding?
Well, I think, it's very important to understand what you're getting into. So if you can also go to an attorney, just book a consultation. They can explain the different regimes to you without doing previous research. But I know, especially young people these days, they love climbing on Google and doing some research. So I think it's just a good way to sit privately beforehand without anyone influencing your opinions, and getting a feel of what you guys want at the end of the day.
So can I ask on that point, what is your options? Because I think actually sitting here, I kind of thought I had an idea, but I realized that I'm not really 100% sure what the various options are and what is, as you said, the legal implications of each of them.
Yes. Okay, well, first of all, you'll determine how you want to get married. Usually if you're a husband and a wife, a man and a woman, and you want to enter into marriage, you'll enter via a civil marriage, which is in terms of the Marriage Act. So that is a man and a woman. And then you're typically looking at whether you want to get married in community of property, out of community of property with the accrual system, or out of a community property without the accrual system. Okay. So I'll quickly explain to you more or less what each one entails. So when you decide to get married in community of property, it means that your separate estates becomes one joint estate, and all of your assets and liabilities, so any assets that you have that's been paid off, or anything that you're acquiring, or any liabilities that you had, or that any credit that you have that you still need to pay, everything will form part of the joint estate. And you're basically merging it into, like it would be one person into one joint estate. So you're sharing each other's losses, you're sharing each other's financial prosperity. So that's very important, to note. And that is usually what you would find, the older generation got married in community of property, most of them. Usually an attorney wouldn't advise that, just because because you have one joint estate, there's no protection between the parties. Let's say your husband develops a gambling problem and he's sequestrated, or whatever the situation is. Sometimes it isn't even a problem, but things happen. Like, for example, with COVID, all of us had bad experiences. And then it affects the wife's estates as well. Both of you are then sequestrated. And, it's very difficult to maintain a family in that situation. So that would be our advice. Usually an attorney won't advise you to get married in community of property, but of course you need to discuss your situation with your attorney. The discussing part, yeah. And then out of community of property, that would be the preferred option, especially for young couples, older couples, anyone across the board. So out of community of property without accrual means that you are getting married. You still have your separate estates like you would before you were married. So he still has his estate with his assets and liabilities, and you have your estate with your asset and liabilities as a woman. And that position remains the same throughout the marriage as well. So the negative of that is you don't share in each other's profits and financial gain, but you also don't share in each other's debts and losses. So, and mismanagement of funds. Let's say the same situation, if your husband does have a gambling problem and he is getting sequestrated, or whatever the situation is, you can actually have him apply to have him sequestrated, because you can see there is an issue. So obviously that's not anyone's wish that they want to achieve, but sometimes it is for the benefit of the joint family unit. And then, in the case of, let's say, when he's deceased or she is deceased, then all of your assets aren't frozen. So you can still continue and, maintain the family, take care of the kids, and it doesn't affect the whole.
So if it was in community, if one of the partners were to pass away, it would basically affect both.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, more seriously.
Yes, because your entire estate is then winded up. So that would definitely, time-wise, it affects you getting access to all of your assets. It will affect you with bank accounts and everything you need, because in a case of incommunicable property, you need each other's permission and consent to do anything. So any juristic act, we call it a juristic act. So if you enter into a contract, if you buy a property, if you
need both signatures.
Apply for a bond, you need both signatures, exactly. Yes. So where out of community property is the exact opposite. You don't need the consent of the other spouse, and the other spouse doesn't even have to have knowledge of what you are doing in your separate estate. So, but there's also disadvantages, like I mentioned, like you don't share. If you have, let's say, for example, a wife that stays at home with the children, even though she contributes to the, the family, and she doesn't necessarily economically or financially contribute, but she won't then share in those gains or the profits of the...
So that's where the accrual comes in.
Exactly. Okay. So that's the aim of the accrual. So when you get married out of community of property with the accrual, then it basically acts to negate those separation of estates. What it does is you still have your separate estates, but at the time of divorce or decease, then the spouse that has the lesser growth can institute a claim against the other spouse with more growth that is the accrual claim. And so how more or less that works, I can quickly explain to you, is let's say, for example, you guys get married and you conclude an antinuptial agreement, because it's very important to note that we'll discuss this a little bit more in detail, but you need to conclude an antinuptial agreement in order to get married out of community of property. Otherwise, before you can say I do. So before you stand here and you say I do, you have to actually have that contract in place. I'm sure you guys did the same.
Yes.
Exactly. So if you don't do that, then you are automatically married in community of property, and there's no way you can change that. Then you are married in community of property.
You need to get divorced before you can then enter.
Yes, but we won't advise to you to do that. But because
I think that's an important point, because I think that's what people might not know, is that you need to take that step before you walk down the aisle.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So before you get to where we're sitting right now, you need to get all those.
Yeah, so that's where the major difference comes in within community and out of community of property. So out of community of property with accrual, without accrual, you need your antinuptial agreement, and it needs to be notarized and everything. But just to get back to the accrual claim, so let's say, for example, you guys get married, but you and I are getting married. You have a car that you bought for 250,000 Rand, which then in your antinuptial agreement, you state that, okay, you have a car with 250,000 Rand, that's your asset that you had before the wedding. I don't have anything yet, I just came out of varsity, I don't have anything. Okay, so we get married, we grow financially and we do well in our careers. You do very well, you end up owning a company and your net worth is worth R1 million. Okay, where I'm also doing well, I'm surviving, but then the children come. So I'm at home taking care of the children, so I'm not growing as much as you are. Then my estate ends up being 500,000 Rand. So then basically what happens is we look at the difference between the estates. So yours is 500,000 Rand more than mine. So therefore we divide it between two to get, the half of the growth. Then I have a claim against your estate for 250,000 Rand. So that's just to bring the parties on equal footing at the dates when you separate, either from death or divorce.
Will that always be 50-50? If it's with the accrual, will it always be, so whatever is gained by the two parties together will be split in two then? Okay.
Yeah, so it's basically just to bring them as if they were, on the exact same level. So yes, there's always 50-50. You can't really negotiate otherwise. That is the way the law is drafted. And that's the accrual calculation.
Okay, that's quite interesting. You noted there that the antinuptial agreement needs to be notarized.
Yes.
What does that mean? Because I think, is this something that I can do on a Saturday morning before I'm getting married? Okay,
so first of all, yes, it is. The thing with that is obviously we wouldn't advise it as attorneys at all, because it's such a complex, it's not really a complex contract, but it's a complex to think it and to actually do it, is completely different things. You need to make sure that of your financial position, you need to make sure of what you actually want. So that obviously takes time and you need to discuss it with someone. So specifically an attorney or a notary. So what happens is you can do it the morning of your wedding, but then in the ANC, in your antinuptial agreement, you need to specifically state the time that you concluded the agreement. So let's say we're getting married at 3:00 in the afternoon. We state that, okay, we notarized and signed our agreement at 10 a.m. So that needs to be, but obviously please don't do that. So
what would be in front of a commissioner of oaths or
a notary public specifically. So that is even more, they have even more stringent requirements than a commissioner of oaths. So that is attorneys, that is someone that has an LLB or a law degree and that writes an extra examination to be able to notarize agreements. So you need to do that, specifically with a notary public, and also just what is an antinuptial agreement. It's basically to avoid you getting married in community of property and to avoid the accrual system if you didn't want the accrual system to apply. So you need to set out everything, your financial position as you would want it. And you need to, before you get married, like we mentioned. And that's the gist of it. Also, for interest sake, it's something that is registered in the deeds offices. So that has to take place 3 months after you signed and notarized the agreement. So basically 3 months after you got married, then you need to be registered because that is a legal requirement. If it isn't done, then that has legal implications for you. It's not valid. You can bring a court application to and ask the High Court for condemnation, but it is very important. Yeah. So, of course, you need to see a notary and you need to do those things correctly. It's actually not just, you don't just get married, it's not just saying I do. There's a lot to it.
You mentioned now something that I don't know. Okay, obviously, it needs to be notarized, that I understand. But registering it in the deeds office, will your attorney then handle it for you, or do the couple do it themselves, or how does that work? Because if you forget that, obviously,
it's not legal. It's not valid. Yes. So when you go see your notary, obviously, if you want to enter into an antinuptial agreement, it will be a notary that you will see to conclude your contract. Usually they handle everything for you. So they will register it in the deeds office. It's not something that you need to worry about at all. But you just need to maybe make sure that they do it within the 3 months. So I would say it would be good to just follow up with them. But they do it themselves. And also they usually do it. You can do it in any deeds office. It's not, for us as lawyers, we're used to sticking to, your jurisdictions and where you're domiciled or where you reside. In this case, it doesn't apply. So the notary will advise you. They will guide you. They will tell you, okay, we usually work with Bloemfontein or we work with Gauteng. We're going to register it there. So, as long as it's registered, that's fine.
Lisa, thank you very much. That was quite insightful for me. And I think any couple planning a wedding will need to pencil into that wedding planner of theirs somewhere 6 weeks to 2 months before the wedding, that they actually make time to sit and discuss this and then go see a notary or an attorney that can guide them through this process. And then also when this whole celebration is over, the honeymoon is over, to set a soft reminder 2 months after the wedding to just follow up and make sure it was actually registered. Yeah,
and the legal requirements were complied with, definitely.
Okay, so we've now covered a civil marriage. But South African law also acknowledges a civil union as well as a traditional marriage.
Yes, right? That's correct.
Okay. So maybe we can dig into the other two a little bit more.
Yes. So in 2006, we got the Civil Unions Act, which deals specifically with civil unions or civil partnerships. So that is, as we know it, as same-sex marriages. And basically, it is the same as a civil marriage. The requirements are, that the parties need to enter into it voluntarily. They need to be over the ages of 18. It doesn't specifically mention that they need to be of the same sex. So technically, a man and a women can also enter into a civil union or civil partnership, and a civil union and civil partnership carries the same consequences and legal protection as you would with a civil marriage in terms of the Marriage Act. So all of the laws that you find that are applicable with the Marriage Act are also applicable to civil unions. But as I discussed earlier, with regard to your antinuptial agreement, you need to also enter into an antinuptial agreement if you want to be in a civil union or a civil partnership, but you want to be married out of community of property. If you do not do it before the actual union, before you say I do, then you will be married in community of property as well. So
exactly the same.
Exactly the same. And it has the same legal consequences. You can choose to get married in community of property without signing the antinuptial agreement, or you can conclude the antinuptial agreement and get married out of community of property with accrual or without accrual. You can set up your ANC and determine the legal position of how you wish your relationship to be in the future. So that's very important. Lots of people don't realize that they also have that option. In same-sex marriages, you also have that option. So a lot of people are confused and not sure. My advice would be is go to an attorney or a notary, like you mentioned, at least a month before your wedding date, and discuss it with them, and they will advise you in the right direction and explain to you what you need to do, what all of the legal requirements are and the financial and legal consequences. Then on the other point, customary marriages. Yes. Customary marriages are a gray part of the law almost. It's our courts are still struggling with it. However, we do have the recognition of the Customary Marriages Act that came into operation, which tries to assist us in determining, what the legal requirements are for marriage to be valid in terms of the traditional laws as well as the legal aspects. So, as you know, we have 11 languages in South Africa, official languages, so you can just imagine the amount of cultures and traditions that there are in South Africa. There's tons. So it's impossible for the courts to keep up with every single tradition. So the a new act that came into operation basically requires that the parties that enter into the marriage need to do so voluntarily. They need to be over the age of 18, and also they need to enter into it, celebrate it in terms of their customary traditions. So that's the difficult part, because it's very difficult to determine when exactly the marriage is then validated. I just quickly want to mention as well that if you do enter into the marriage without concluding an antinuptial agreement, then you will be married in community of property again. So again, go see an attorney a month beforehand or a notary, and they will guide you to conclude an antinuptial agreement so that you can control your financial position of your relationship. But yeah, it's very difficult to determine exactly when a customary marriage is valid. There's been a court case recently in 2017 or 2019 where they actually dealt with a deceased estate where the wife was deceased and the husband claimed he wanted a portion of the assets that they accumulated together. However, the family disputed that they were never married. Okay. And this is the first time that they ever saw him, which, they were married for 10 years in terms of what they believe is their traditions. However, it was very difficult to determine it because the family say that they never handed over the bride. Even though there was lobola paid, they said the bride was never physically handed over. So when is the marriage validated? It's very difficult to determine that. Of course, when you get in that situation, it's a high court application that they have to bring and you have to prove it. So therefore, it's best to go speak to an attorney, especially young couples today. Rather, go speak to an attorney and make sure all of the legal requirements have been complied with and that there's no confusion in the future. So my advice would definitely be that if you want to enter into a same-sex marriage or a customary marriage, please ensure that you get the right legal advice. We have tried to create a differentiation with customary marriages by asking spouses to register their marriage. So how you usually would register your marriage, you would sign a registry and it would be filed at Home Affairs. You can do this with a customary marriage as well, however, it's not a legal requirement, so it wouldn't invalidate your marriage. But also on that aspect, I would like to stress that you need to remember that if you enter into negotiations and you have paid lobola in terms of a customary marriage, and you only celebrate a year afterwards your marriage, then that means you've been married for a year. So you're already married in community of property, exactly. So before you say, I do, you've already entered into a customary marriage. So therefore, you're already married in community of property. You cannot then want to enter into an antinuptial agreement. So there's lots of factors to consider, but I'd also like to just mention a fun fact of civil unions. If you are a man and a woman, you don't have to be same sex. You can also enter into a civil union, and the husband can actually take the wife's last name. So that's also weird. It's something that's beginning to happen. So
that's something that I wanted to ask, because listening to you talking about this, it's clear that from a legal perspective, whether you enter into a civil marriage or a civil union, in the eyes of the law, you basically treat it the same, or depending on whether you sign an antinuptial agreement or not, and then whether you've got the accrual or not.
Exactly.
So my thought was, in future...
And the same with customary marriages.
Well,
yes.
So in future, do you see the law simplifying, just out of interest? Because, it sounds like the position is the same.
Yeah.
But I can understand with traditional marriages that it's a bit difficult from a legal perspective because of our traditions and things like that. But in terms of a civil union, a civil marriage, it sounds to me very much...
That's actually very interesting that you're asking that. It's a debate that attorneys have had since the Act came into operation, the Civil Union Act now of 2006. It's basically a superfluous act because at the end of the day, it says the same thing as what the Marriage Act says. So it's basically just to differentiate that you can allow it in terms of same-sex marriages, but the laws applicable are exactly the same. So there is argument that they should have just maybe changed the Marriage Act to allow it for same-sex marriages. But it's very interesting. It's a very valid point that you're making.
The only upside there being that the husband could take the wife's surname.
Exactly.
So in our case, my poor wife went from Stolz to Janssen van Rensburg, so we could have made it a lot easier. Only only 5 digits.
Exactly.
But when we got married in 2000, that wasn't an option yet.
No. So exactly, and you picked up on that as well. So there's lots of, honestly, there's so much room to actually negotiate and make sure that you get the right things that you want. You don't want to end up getting married and saying I do, and then wanting to change your marital regime. It is possible, but it's expensive. It's a high court application that you need to bring. It's costly. You need to give notice to your creditors. It's a lengthy process, so I wouldn't advise it. And like you mentioned, maybe you can get divorced and remarried. That's actually not, we wouldn't advise you to do it, because you have to then basically lie under oath and say, okay, listen, I don't love this person anymore. So that's why we say, the best advice is always just prepare beforehand, speak to an attorney, and just get the right advice.
I think from my perspective, as someone who doesn't have any legal experience or training or anything like that, I think, when you get married, it's all the excitement. And I think no one ever enters into a marriage thinking it's not going to work, because otherwise, why would you do that? But unfortunately, I don't know the stats, but I know that unfortunately the statistics are against us in terms of how many people end up getting divorced. And also, horrible things can happen. Someone's business can fail. I think we probably saw this in these last 6 months, that people would have had exciting and amazing businesses, and in a moment things just go wrong. Definitely. And had you done those steps beforehand in terms of those preparations, you would have been able to continue,
and avoid
your family,
definitely, and like avoid major financial losses.
Yeah, so it's something that we never want to talk about. It's like planning your estate, things like that. But I think to all of our brides and grooms watching, take the moment and
along
do
with
that.
What you're saying is it's very important with your estate planning as well. So what we also advise is, when you do your anti-nuptial agreement, when you conclude your marriage, do your will as well. Because I've had a client ask me, okay, but can I just bequeath everything to my wife? Yes, you can, but remember, a will is something that can be changed unilaterally. So if she's mad at you the next day, she can quickly change her will. So that's not something that you would do. You need to prepare beforehand and make sure that you get everything in place and timeously and correctly. So definitely, you never know what the future holds. So just prepare.
It's amazing. So Lisa, thank you very much. I think that was, I learned a lot. I knew about all of this, but I never really understood how it worked. And it will also equip us. If we talk to some of our couples and they ask us, we can at least give them advice. But obviously, we'd like to point them to the experts. Definitely. So I'm quite sure you'll be happy if I put your contact details, email, and office telephone numbers below. And like we said, if you're planning your wedding, take that time. I think it's not going to be days. It's going to be a few hours. And talk about the hard stuff, get it in place, and then you can go and enjoy your awesome wedding and have the confetti and walk down the aisle without any worries and things like that. So.
Thank you so much for having us. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's long overdue. I know we've been planning this for a long while, but things just didn't plan out that way. But
thanks to COVID, but I'm glad we're here and we could finally do it. That's all what counts at the end of the day.
And we're in the chapel, and hopefully, guys, I know the weddings are starting to happen. I think we're shooting our first big wedding shortly as well. Not big, 50 people, but compared to what was happening in COVID times with 5 people present at a wedding, it's 10 times more. It's 10 times more. It's massive, So thank you all very much for watching. Please remember to subscribe to our show. Like we said, with everything opening up, we won't be able to put out episodes every day. We'll put out regular episodes. We'll try and keep you informed of what's happening in the wedding industry. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of those episodes. And remember, when we get to 1,000 subscribers, we'll be giving away that Rieg AD Family Lifestyle or Couple Shoot, as well as that nomination bracelet, kindly sponsored by Nomination South Africa and Gabriel Jewelers. See you guys in the next episode.